The last thing Riven remembered was the brilliant flash of energy tearing across the battlefield, the smell of scorched earth and burning metal thick in her nostrils. She had been fighting alongside her people, the Solari, when the ambush came. One moment she had been locking blades with a human soldier, the next, an explosion of searing plasma had engulfed her. She had collapsed into the mud, her body refusing to move, her green-furred limbs trembling with fading strength. She had closed her emerald eyes, ready to surrender to the eternal forest, where all Solari warriors were said to walk after death. But death was not what greeted her. Instead, there were soft sheets under her aching body, the quiet hum of machinery, and the sterile scent of human medicine. Slowly, Riven's heavy eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the deep gold of late autumn. She was in a stark, unfamiliar room. The walls were smooth and pale, interrupted only by a single large window revealing a sprawling futuristic city beyond, an endless skyline of silver towers and neon lights threading between flying transports. She tried to sit up, but a jolt of pain lanced through her side, forcing a strangled hiss from her lips. Looking down, she found herself clad in a simple white medical gown, the fabric clinging to her slender, toned form. A thin golden chain hung around her neck, the last gift from her mother before the wars began. Her green fur, fine and soft, stood slightly on end. She ran a shaky hand over one of her tall, feline ears, feeling a fresh bandage near the base. Her long, powerful tail, usually a source of pride among her kind, lay limp across the sheets, wrapped in a healing brace. Before she could think further, footsteps echoed in the hallway beyond. Riven immediately scanned the room for something, anything, to defend herself. A tray of instruments on a nearby table, too far. No weapons in sight. She braced herself, gathering what little strength remained. The door slid open with a soft hiss. A tall human male entered, his figure silhouetted against the bright corridor. He wore a tactical vest over dark, rugged clothing, and a utility belt heavy with gear. His short cropped hair was peppered with silver despite his youthful face, and a jagged scar crossed his left eyebrow. His gaze was sharp, assessing, but not hostile. Riven's claws flexed reflexively beneath the blanket. "You're awake," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "Where am I?" she rasped, her throat dry as sand. "Safe," he answered, stepping inside. He held his hands open at his sides, showing he carried no weapon in the moment. "My name is Corin Dax. And before you tear me apart, know that I'm not Federation." Riven bared her sharp canines in a faint snarl. "You smell like them." A slight, rueful smile tugged at his mouth. "I was them. Once." He approached slowly, pulling a small metal stool to the side of her bed and sitting down. She glared at him with a ferocity that masked the weakness in her body. "Why save me? I'm Solari. Federation policy is extermination." His smile faded. "Not mine," he said simply. Riven's heart pounded against her ribs. She had spent her life learning to hate humans, especially Federation soldiers. They had razed her villages, poisoned her forests. Yet here sat one, close enough to touch, without chains, without weapons, claiming to be her ally. "Rest," Corin said, reaching into his jacket. He produced a small device and set it on the table. "You're still healing. They wanted you dead, but I had other ideas." "I don't understand," Riven whispered. Her mind spun, distrust warring with curiosity. "Why?" Corin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His dark eyes softened. "Because the Federation is planning something worse than anything you've seen. And if we don't stop it, your people won't just lose the war. They'll vanish." Riven narrowed her gaze, her tail twitching. "You expect me to trust you?" "No," Corin admitted. "But you'll have to decide quickly. Because we're running out of time." Outside the window, the gleaming spires of the human city shone under a blood-red sunset. And somewhere beneath that glittering facade, death was already preparing its final blow. Riven's instincts screamed at her to attack, to run, to do anything but stay lying in this human den. Yet her battered body betrayed her, still sluggish from wounds and sedatives. She clenched her hands into fists beneath the thin blanket, sharp green claws pricking the fabric. Corin stood from the stool, careful not to make any sudden moves. "You're probably wondering if this is a trick," he said, tone calm, measured. "If I were you, I'd think the same." "Then why not chain me?" Riven rasped, eyeing him warily. Corin shrugged, a weary gesture. "Because you're not a prisoner. I need you alive. I need you free." She stared, golden eyes narrow slits. "What are you asking of me?" He turned toward a console embedded in the wall, tapping a series of commands. A hollow display flickered to life, casting a ghostly blue glow across the room. It showed an orbital platform, a sleek, monstrous thing, hanging above a green and blue planet. "This," Corin said, "is the Aegis Array. The Federation claims it's a new planetary defense system. In truth, it's something much worse." The image shifted, revealing schematics, an intricate network of dispersion modules, chemical analysis units, and atmosphere filters. As Riven studied it, a growing sense of dread gripped her chest. "You recognize it?" Corin asked quietly. Riven's voice was cold. "A bioweapon." He nodded. "A targeted atmospheric sterilization system. Designed to eradicate non-human genetic markers, including Solari DNA." Riven felt sick. How far along are they?" "First deployment in 7 days," Corin said grimly. "Field test over your last remaining refuge on Kaylee's 4. Riven closed her eyes for a moment, pressing her hand over her heart. Kaylee's 4 was home to thousands of Solari, families, elders, cubs too young to fight. "If we don't stop it," Corin continued, "they'll all die. And it won't stop there. Any species the Federation sees as a threat will be next." Riven forced herself to sit up despite the pain. Her tail lashed once behind her, agitated, her green fur bristling. "Why are you telling me this? Why risk your life to save people your kind have sworn to wipe out?" Corin met her gaze without flinching. "Because I swore an oath once, to protect the innocent. Not to commit genocide under the lie of security. I broke ranks. I stole this intel. Now they're hunting me too." Riven's breathing was shallow, rapid. Her mind raced, calculating, weighing. "You need me to help you destroy it." "I need your skills, yes," Corin admitted. "You're Solari. You're faster, quieter. Better trained than any human operative I've worked with. I can't do this alone." Silence stretched between them, heavy with history, bloodshed, mistrust. "And if I refuse?" she asked, voice low. Corin's expression hardened. "Then I'll still try. And I'll probably fail." He crossed the room to a supply cabinet, pulling out a folded uniform, civilian-grade armor, flexible and dark. He placed it on the foot of her bed without comment. "Choice is yours, Riven," he said quietly. "But if we don't fight together, your people won't live to see another dawn." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I'll give you an hour to decide. We move at dusk." The door hissed shut behind him, leaving Riven alone with her thoughts. She stared down at the armor, her tail curling anxiously around her leg. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, ancient Solari wisdom passed down through the generations. "When the forest burns, even the fiercest beasts must find new ground, or perish in the flames." With trembling hands, she reached for the armor. If she was going to die, she would not do it lying helpless in a human bed. She would fight. Riven gritted her teeth as she struggled into the civilian armor. The material stretched over her athletic frame, designed to accommodate a range of body types, but the fit was snug over her curving form and thick fur. She tugged the hood up over her tall ears, securing the fastenings along her jawline. Only the faintest trace of green fur peeked from beneath the edges. When Corin returned exactly 1 hour later, he found her standing by the window, silhouetted against the neon-lit skyline. His gaze flickered briefly to her, and something unreadable crossed his face, relief, maybe, or something deeper he did not yet dare name. "You ready?" he asked. Riven turned, golden eyes steady. "I don't trust you," she said bluntly. "Good," Corin replied with a faint smirk. Means you're smart. But we don't have the luxury of trust right now. Only survival. He handed her a compact device no larger than her palm. She turned it over in her fingers, sleek, black, and humming faintly with stored energy. EMP charge, Corin explained. Short range. Knock out electronics for about 60 seconds. We'll need it to breach the security gates. Riven tucked it into a pouch at her hip. Where are we going? The underbelly, he said grimly. The surface gleams, but underneath, that's where the Federation buries the things it doesn't want the public to see. He led her out into the dim service corridors behind the apartment, where the walls were exposed metal and pipes hissed with steam. They moved silently, Riven's padded feet barely making a sound. Corin was good too. He moved like a man who had spent too many years navigating enemy lines. Their path took them into the lower districts, forgotten slums crammed between the bases of the gleaming towers. Here, the air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of chemical runoff. Crowds bustled through narrow alleys, their faces hard and closed. Riven's ears flicked beneath her hood, alert to every sound, every shifting shadow. Her kind weren't welcome here. Neither were ex-Federation soldiers. Corin paused beside a rusted service elevator, tapping a rapid sequence into the access panel. The doors groaned open, revealing a shaft lit by flickering emergency lights. This is it, he said. Once we're below, there's no turning back. Was there ever? Riven asked coolly, stepping into the lift. Corin followed, and the doors creaked shut behind them. As the elevator descended, he briefed her in a low voice. The Aegis control node is housed underground, beneath the East Sector complex. We can't get close from the surface, too much security. But there's an old maintenance system that still links to it. Forgotten by most. You're sure it's still accessible? She asked. No, he admitted. But it's our best shot. The lift rattled to a halt. The doors slid open onto darkness and silence. Corin pulled a small tactical light from his belt, sweeping the beam across the abandoned maintenance corridor. The walls were stained with rust. Tangled cables hung like vines from the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Riven stepped lightly into the gloom, her sensitive feline senses already adjusting. Her tail flicked once behind her, a silent signal of alertness. They moved deeper into the maze of tunnels, navigating by old maps Corin had memorized. At intersections, he checked the faded markers scratched into the walls, signs left by smugglers, vagrants, or perhaps others who had dared to tread these forgotten veins of the city. After nearly an hour, they reached a heavy security door, sealed with a biometric lock. Corin pulled the EMP device from his belt, arming it with a click. Get ready to move. He slapped it against the lock. A brief, sharp pulse of blue light flooded the corridor. The lock's indicator light flickered, then died. The mechanism groaned, releasing with a hiss. Corin and Riven slipped through. Beyond the door, a narrow access tunnel led down toward the Federation's hidden heart. Stay close, Corin murmured. You're not fast enough to lose me, Riven whispered back, a hint of teasing curling around her words before she could stop herself. Corin shot her a glance, a quick grin flashing in the dark. And then they plunged deeper into the belly of the Federation, where secrets festered, and betrayal lurked behind every shadow. The tunnel sloped downward, twisting and branching like the veins of some long-forgotten giant. Riven moved like a shadow, her green-furred form blending into the dim, corroded environment. Corin was only a few steps ahead, his movements silent, economical, a man trained for infiltration, though she could tell by the subtle tightness in his posture that he was accustomed to fighting with firepower, not stealth. They came to a junction where the tunnel forked in 3 directions. Corin paused, frowning at the crumbling signage overhead. Left, he murmured after a second's hesitation. Sure? Riven asked, her ears swiveling to catch the faintest noise from the other tunnels. No, he admitted with a grim smile. But if we're wrong, we'll know soon enough. They pressed on into the left-hand corridor. The air grew thicker, heavier, laced with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen systems on the verge of failure. The floor sloped even steeper now, the walls narrowing until Riven's shoulders brushed the sides if she wasn't careful. Water pooled underfoot, chilling through the thin soles of her boots. Ahead, Corin slowed, raising a hand in warning. Riven froze, crouching low. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, armored. A squad of Federation enforcers. Through a crack in the rusted wall plating, Riven saw them, 4 humans in black tactical armor, moving in formation. Their faces were hidden behind visors, their weapons sleek and ready. They were sweeping the tunnels, searching. Riven's heart pounded fiercely against her ribs. Her instincts screamed to attack, to leap at them with claws and fury. But Corin pressed back against the wall, his hands signaling wait. The enforcers paused barely 3 meters away. "We shouldn't be down here," one muttered voice distorted through his helmet. "This sector's been off-grid for years." "Orders," another snapped. "Priority target detected. Hybrid signature." Riven's fur bristled at that. Hybrid. That's what the Federation called anything that wasn't fully human. Less than. Disposable. The enforcers moved on, vanishing down the adjoining corridor. Corin exhaled quietly. He tapped Riven on the shoulder and nodded toward their original path. They moved swiftly, silently, not daring to speak until the sounds of the patrol faded behind them. At last, in a slightly wider section of the tunnel, Riven grabbed Corin's arm, forcing him to stop. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "They're hunting me," she whispered. "They're hunting us both," Corin corrected, voice low but urgent. "You're the prize. I'm the traitor." Riven's tail lashed once behind her, frustration bleeding through her careful control. "They'll double patrols now. We can't move like this." "We'll adapt," Corin said simply. "We don't have a choice." She studied him for a long moment. His face was lit only by the dim red glow of the failing overhead lights, but she could see the tension there, the weariness beneath his controlled exterior. "You really did turn against them," Riven said softly, almost to herself. "I turned towards something better," Corin replied. He gave her a wry look. "Besides, getting shot at by both sides? I must be doing something right." Despite herself, Riven felt a small smile tug at the corner of her mouth. A distant mechanical whine drew both their attention. "Drone patrol," Corin said grimly. "We need to get off this main tunnel." They sprinted now, feet splashing through the shallow water. Riven's wounded shoulder ached with every jolt, but she pushed through it, driven by adrenaline and the primal need to survive. Up ahead, an old maintenance hatch gaped open, leading into a service duct barely wide enough for a human to crawl through. Corin gestured to it. "Go." "You're bigger," Riven protested. "I'll cover you." No time to argue. Riven dropped to all fours, her lithe feline form slipping into the duct with uncanny ease. Behind her, Corin turned, drawing a compact plasma pistol from beneath his jacket. The drone rounded the corner, sleek, insectal, its optical sensors flaring blue. Corin fired. The bolt hit the drone dead center. It exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke, but not before its alarm screeched through the tunnels like a wail of the damned. "Move!" Corin barked, diving into the duct after Riven. They crawled in silence, heartbeats hammering in their ears, the world behind them erupting in the chaos they had unleashed. And ahead? The darkness waited. The duct walls closed tight around them, forcing Riven to press her slender body low to the ground, her tail curled tightly against her side to avoid snagging. The metal smelled of rust and ancient oil, every scrape and breath echoing louder than she liked. Corin followed close behind, his larger frame moving with surprising agility for a human. Riven could hear him muttering low curses every time his boots scraped against the tight walls, but he kept pace. "Remind me," Corin grunted under his breath, "whose brilliant idea it was to take the rat tunnels?" "You volunteered," Riven shot back over her shoulder, unable to hide the amusement in her voice. A faint chuckle from Corin. "Right. Next time, you're leading the way." "I am leading the way," she retorted, glancing back to flash him a quick, toothy grin. In the dimness, the green of her fur almost seemed to glow faintly, a ghostly shimmer ahead of him. The momentary levity evaporated when they reached a junction where the duct split again. One path leading sharply upward, the other descending deeper underground. Corrin consulted a tiny projection from a wrist device strapped to his arm. "We need the lower levels," he said, angling his head to squint at the fading map overlay. "Aegis control is housed just above the old geothermal infrastructure." Riven nodded and dropped into the descending tunnel, her claws providing silent traction against the slippery metal. The world grew hotter the deeper they crawled. The air was thick, humid, filled with the stench of machines' sweat and dying systems. Beads of moisture gathered on Riven's fur, soaking into her armor. Corrin's voice was tight behind her. "How's the shoulder?" "Fine," she lied. She felt his gaze linger on her back for a heartbeat longer than necessary, but he didn't press the issue. Another point in his favor, not prying, not treating her like she was fragile. They pressed on, navigating through bends and service grates until the duct widened into a larger maintenance passage lined with ancient piping. Riven dropped lightly to the ground first, her boots hitting the metal with a muted clang. She turned to help Corrin down, offering her hand. For a second, he hesitated. Trust wasn't something either of them gave easily. Then Corrin gripped her wrist firmly, his callous palm rough against the silky fur covering hers. She anchored him as he lowered himself silently beside her. Their hands lingered a moment longer than needed. Riven pulled back first, flexing her fingers as if the simple touch had somehow seared her. "This way," she said, voice rougher than intended. They moved quickly but cautiously through the maintenance passage, ducking under fallen beams and sidestepping puddles of grimy water. As they turned another corner, a mechanical whir snapped both of them into instant alert. Another drone, but this one was larger, heavier, its weapons hot and ready. It had been posted here, guarding the inner service approaches. "No time for stealth," Corrin said grimly. Riven's lips peeled back in a feral grin. "Good. I'm tired of sneaking." Before Corrin could object, she launched forward, moving with blinding speed. The drone fired, but Riven was already rolling aside, the plasma bolt missing her by inches. She vaulted off a nearby wall, using the narrow confines of the tunnel to her advantage, and landed squarely atop the machine. Her claws extended, gleaming wickedly in the flickering light. With a savage hiss, she slashed through its sensory array. Sparks showered the air, and the drone staggered wildly, trying to recalibrate. Corrin moved in from the side, plasma pistol barking twice. The first shot punched through the drone's weapons housing, the second hit the power core. The drone exploded in a contained blast, throwing both of them back against the walls. For a moment, only the sound of hissing steam and crackling wires filled the passage. Then Riven pushed herself upright, coughing once, her fur singed but intact. Corrin staggered to his feet, checking her with a sharp look. "You okay?" "I'm sorry," she said with a small, fierce smile. "It'll take more than that." Corrin smiled back, relief flashing in his eyes before he masked it. "Come on," he said. "We're getting close." They moved forward again, hearts pounding, the mission burning between them like a second pulse. But something unspoken now lingered in the air. A growing bond. Fragile, but real. Forged not in trust, not yet, but in survival. And in the first seeds of something stronger than hatred. The maintenance corridor ended in a reinforced hatch covered in grime and faded warning labels. Corrin knelt by the control panel, prying it open with a battered tool from his belt. Sparks flew as he bypassed the old locking mechanisms, his fingers moving with the precision of long-practiced sabotage. Riven stood watch, her sharp golden eyes scanning the shadows behind them. Her tail flicked once, agitation humming in every muscle. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too easy. "You sure this is the way?" she asked slowly. "Positive," Corrin replied without looking up. "This puts us right beneath Aegis control. From there, it's a straight climb into the core." The hatch released with a heavy clang and swung inward, revealing a narrow shaft leading downward into darkness, broken only by a thin strip of flickering emergency lights. Corin swung his legs over the edge and began descending the old service ladder bolted into the shaft wall. Riven followed, her feline agility making the climb effortless despite the rust-slick rungs. They dropped into a circular maintenance chamber. From here, a single heavy blast door separated them from the lower levels of the Aegis array. Corin moved to the access console, beginning the override sequence. And that's when Riven smelled it. Not the usual stench of decay and machine oil. Something cleaner. Something metallic. Her ears twitched sharply, swiveling toward the ceiling vents. "Corin!" she hissed, her voice urgent. "We're not alone!" He froze, hand hovering over the console. A faint hissing noise filled the chamber. "Gas! Mask!" Corin barked, tossing her a small filtration device from his belt. Riven caught it and strapped it over her muzzle in one smooth motion just as a new figure dropped from the shadows above. Black armor. Red markings. No insignia. Silent assassins. Federation blackguard. The first attacker lunged for Riven, a stun blade humming with energy. She dodged, her muscles screaming, her weakened body pushed to its limit. Corin fired 2 quick shots, forcing the other 2 blackguards into cover behind machinery. "Move!" he shouted, tossing her a second plasma pistol. Riven caught it, flipping it expertly into a ready grip. She fired at the nearest blackguard, forcing him to roll aside, but these were no ordinary soldiers. They moved like shadows, swift and disciplined. Another charged her, aiming low. Riven twisted, using her momentum to vault over him, planting a boot against his back and sending him sprawling. Corin covered her flank, trading shots with the others. "We can't stay here!" Riven snarled, blasting one blackguard's weapon from his hand. "The hatch!" Corin barked. "We drop through, no other way!" Riven nodded grimly. Together they moved. Corin slammed his shoulder into the emergency release for the secondary hatch while Riven laid down suppressing fire. The door hissed open, revealing a narrow drop into darkness. Corin leapt first without hesitation. Riven followed, twisting in midair like a cat, her tail streaming behind her. They landed hard, rolling across a lower maintenance deck. Alarms wailed overhead. The blackguards had triggered full lockdown. "We need to move, now!" Corin shouted, pulling her to her feet. Ahead, beyond another maze of catwalks and support struts, the Aegis control center loomed, an armored vault surrounded by active defenses. But between them and their goal, blackguards descended from every access point, a coordinated net tightening with every second. Riven bared her fangs, the adrenaline singing through her veins now. "One way through," she growled. "Together," Corin said, his voice steady. Their eyes locked. A silent agreement. Live or die, they would face this side by side. And with a roar of plasma fire and flashing claws, they charged into the storm. The first wave of blackguards met them head-on. Corin fired in controlled bursts, targeting joints and exposed armor seams. Each shot was precise, calculated, the product of countless battlefields where hesitation meant death. Riven was pure motion beside him, faster, more fluid, a green-furred blur of claws and plasma. She vaulted over fallen catwalks and twisted around beams, her strikes so swift that even the blackguards struggled to track her. 2 moved to flank them. Corin pivoted, dropping one with a shot between the plates of his shoulder guard. The second lunged at Riven from behind, stun baton raised. She spun without looking, her long tail snapping forward like a whip. The weighted tip struck the soldier's helmet with a crack, staggering him long enough for her to pounce, slashing his throat with a sharp, brutal efficiency. "Left!" Corin shouted. Riven darted, weaving past a barrage of plasma fire. Her shoulder burned from an earlier wound, but she ignored it, forcing her body to keep moving. They had to reach the control node. If they failed, Kaylee's 4 would be nothing but a graveyard. The vault doors ahead loomed closer now. 3 guards positioned at the entrance began laying down a suppressing barrage, their heavier weapons chewing through the metal structures around them. "We're pinned!" Corin barked, ducking behind a thick support column that shuddered with every impact. Riven pressed herself against the same cover, breathing hard. She wiped blood, hers? Theirs, from her brow with a trembling hand. You still have the second EMP charge? She asked, her golden eyes gleaming with fierce resolve. Corin patted his belt and nodded grimly. Throw it, she said. On my mark. He hesitated. You won't survive a full frontal rush. Maybe not, Riven said, a wild, daring grin flashing across her face. But I was born to run toward the fire. For a moment, Corin looked like he wanted to argue. Then he just nodded once, tight and sure. Mark! He hurled the EMP. The charge detonated midair with a sharp whump, sending a pulse of blue static cascading across the entrance. The guards' weapons sputtered dead. Their HUDs scrambled. They shouted in confusion. Riven moved. She was a green shadow among them, a spirit of vengeance. Her claws found flesh, her stolen plasma pistol sang death. She disarmed the first guard, drove the butt of the weapon into his jaw, turned and caught the second across the knee with a sweeping kick that snapped bone. Corin followed a second behind, dispatching the third with a clean shot to the helmet's joint. The vault stood unguarded now, the emergency systems rebooting, alarms blaring louder than ever. Corin dashed to the access console, working furiously to override the lockdown. Keep me covered! He shouted over the sirens. Riven planted herself beside him, shoulders heaving, scanning every angle. More blackguards were incoming. She could hear their boots pounding above, see shadows flickering through the smoke. Another squad would be on them in less than a minute. How long? She demanded. Too long! Corin growled back, sweat dripping from his temple as he bypassed one security layer after another. Riven's claws flexed at her sides. She would not die here. Not in the dark. Not without fighting for her people's future. More plasma bolts screamed toward them. Riven knocked one aside with a twisted scrap of metal scavenged from the ruined catwalk. Another grazed her hip, searing the fabric of her armor and scorching the green fur beneath. She snarled, baring her fangs. Another squad, 8 soldiers this time, fanned out into the chamber. One raised a heavy plasma repeater. Too slow. Riven hurled her scrap shield with deadly accuracy, striking the gun's barrel just as it fired, sending the shot wild and forcing the soldier back. Corin cursed under his breath. Manual override failed. Switching to hardline bypass. Work faster, Riven hissed, grabbing a fallen rifle and bracing herself in front of him. The blackguards charged. This time, there would be no running. This time, they would stand and fight. Together. The blackguards came at them like a tidal wave of black armor and steel. Riven threw herself into the fight without hesitation. The salvaged rifle in her hands barked with deadly rhythm, plasma bolts punching into armored chests and visors, sending the first 2 attackers sprawling. She moved with a grace born of instinct, ducking low, rolling between strikes, her tail a green flash that tripped one soldier mid-charge. Behind her, Corin cursed under his breath as the access terminal buzzed and flickered under his desperate fingers. I need another minute! He shouted. You don't have a minute! Riven snapped, leaping to intercept a blackguard that had broken through the line. She slammed into him, claws raking across the seams of his armor. He crumpled under her weight, but another replaced him almost instantly. A stunned baton grazed her side, pain flaring like fire, but she twisted away, ignoring the smell of her own singed fur. She kicked the baton from the soldier's hand, pivoted, and drove an elbow into his throat. 3 more soldiers advanced. She wouldn't hold them all. Corin saw it too. He drew a compact fragmentation grenade from his belt, primed it, and hurled it with a practiced snap of his wrist. The explosion rocked the chamber, throwing bodies and debris alike into the smoke-choked air. Fall back! Corin barked, grabbing Riven's arm and yanking her back toward the vault. They stumbled behind the heavy bulk of the control node's armored entrance, barely shielded from the secondary blasts and shrapnel. Riven's chest heaved. Blood matted the green fur along her ribs where a plasma shot had grazed her. Her left leg throbbed with every step. But her eyes, her brilliant, defiant golden eyes, burned brighter than ever. Don't die on me, Corin said hoarsely, his hand tight around her forearm. I'm Solari, Riven rasped, her lips quirking into a fierce grin. We don't die easy. The terminal beeped once, then twice. Access granted? Corin slammed his hand onto the override control. The heavy vault doors shuddered and began to slide open, revealing the core of the Aegis array, a vast room filled with humming machines, glowing consoles, and the heart of humanity's most terrible weapon. Move! Corin shouted, shoving her through ahead of him. The second they cleared the threshold, he triggered the manual lockdown. The doors ground shut behind them with a final, echoing boom, cutting them off from the soldiers outside, for now. Inside, the core pulsed with sickly blue light. Massive coolant tanks lined the walls, cables snaking across the floor like veins. At the center, the primary control spire rose, sleek, beautiful, and terrible. The targeting system's here, Corin said, panting. We take it offline. We destroy their ability to deploy the sterilization package. Riven limped forward, baring her teeth. Let's finish this. They moved together toward the spire, every step echoing across the vast chamber. But from the shadows near the base of the control tower, a figure emerged. Not a soldier. Not a blackguard. Someone far more dangerous. A woman clad in white Federation tactical gear, her dark hair pulled tightly back, a commander's insignia gleaming on her collar. Her eyes were like ice, cold, merciless. Corin Dax, she said, voice dripping venom. I should have known you'd betray us. Corin stiffened. Commander Vale. You always were weak. Vale sneered, her plasma carbine aimed squarely at his chest. Sentimental. Broken. And now you bring this thing with you. She spat, glancing at Riven with disgust. A pet alien to help you destroy humanity's salvation? Corin stepped protectively in front of Riven. We're not the broken ones, he said coldly. You are. You became what we were supposed to fight. Vale's finger tightened on the trigger. Riven's muscles coiled, ready to spring. But it was Corin who moved first. With a roar, he tackled Vale to the side as she fired. The plasma bolt scorched the air where he'd been standing a heartbeat before. The two crashed to the floor, grappling for control of the weapon. Go! Corin barked at Riven, struggling against Vale's strength. Take down the spire! Riven hesitated for one agonizing second. Leave him? No. Not after everything. With a snarl, she launched toward them. Riven closed the distance in a blur, her powerful legs propelling her forward faster than any human reflex could match. Commander Vale barely had time to register the green-furred shape slamming into her side. The impact sent Vale skidding across the smooth floor, her plasma carbine torn from her grip and clattering away into the shadows. Corin scrambled upright, breathing hard, a look of grim relief crossing his face as he met Riven's gaze. You didn't leave. Wasn't planning to. Riven growled, her fangs bared. Vale rose slowly, wiping blood from her lip where Riven's strike had split the skin. She drew a compact blade from her belt, its edge crackling with energy. You think you can stop this? Vale spat, circling them like a wolf sizing up its prey. You think saving a few thousand aliens will change anything? Humanity must ascend. Survival demands it. No, Corin said, voice like iron. Murder is not survival. It's cowardice. Vale lunged, straight for Riven. Their blades clashed, sparks flying as Riven parried the energy blade with the reinforced barrel of her salvaged plasma rifle. Vale was fast, deadly fast, but Riven was faster. Her Solari instincts, honed through generations of survival in the harshest wilds, guided her. Riven ducked low, sweeping her tail across Vale's legs, but the commander leapt aside with inhuman agility, slashing downward. The blade nicked Riven's shoulder, sending a hot flash of pain through her nerves. Corin moved to intercept, drawing his combat knife, but Vale pivoted between them with terrifying grace, driving a boot into his gut and sending him sprawling against the console. Riven snarled, the sound primal, ancient. She shed the last remnants of restraint. This was not strategy. It was not politics. It was survival. She feinted left, then lashed out with a powerful right hook that sent Vale staggering. Following through, Riven vaulted forward, tackling Vale against the nearest bulkhead. Metal dented beneath the force. Vale raked her blade across Riven's ribs, scoring deep, but Riven barely flinched. She slammed her forearm against Vale's wrist, knocking the blade free, then drove her knee into the human's stomach. Vale collapsed to her knees, gasping. Corin was there an instant later, pinning the commander's arms behind her back, wrenching her upright. Blood ran freely from Riven's side, staining her green fur, but she stood tall, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. "You won't win," Vale hissed between clenched teeth. "Even if you destroy this facility, the Federation will rebuild. Stronger. Smarter. We'll deal with them," Corin said coldly. "One lie at a time." He secured Vale's hands behind her with a magnetic restraint. Riven stumbled, catching herself against the control spire. Corin was at her side instantly, his hand steadying her. His eyes scanned the blood soaking her side, his jaw tightening. "I'm fine," she rasped, though she knew the wound was bad. "Finish it." Corin hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded grimly. He keyed into the main console, pulling the data spike from his belt. As he worked, Riven leaned against the spire, forcing herself to stay upright. Every breath burned, but she refused to fall now. Not when they were so close. Vale slumped against the floor, glaring at them with pure, undiluted hatred. "You'll die here," she spat. "Even if you succeed, you'll never make it out." Corin ignored her. He slammed the data spike home. The console flickered, resisted, then. Access granted? The control systems for the Aegis array unlocked before them. "Ready?" Corin asked, glancing at Riven. She managed a weak, defiant grin. "Let's burn it down." Together, they activated the system's overload sequence. A low hum filled the chamber, growing louder, building toward a crescendo. Warning sirens blared. Emergency protocols flashed across every display. The Aegis array was dying. "Time to go!" Corin barked, grabbing Riven's arm and hauling her upright. They sprinted, half running, half dragging, toward the emergency evacuation lifts embedded in the far wall. Behind them, the control chamber began to shudder, lights popping, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. Vale's scream of rage followed them into the lift as the doors slammed shut. As the lift rose, Riven slumped against Corin, too weak to hold herself upright any longer. Her side throbbed with every heartbeat, blood slick under her armor. Corin wrapped an arm around her, holding her steady. His grip was firm, protective. "You held the line," he whispered against her ear. "So did you," she murmured back, her voice thick with exhaustion, and something else. Something warmer. The lift rocketed toward the surface, carrying them away from the crumbling heart of the Federation's sins. But outside, a war still waited. And their fight was far from over. The lift doors groaned open into chaos. Above them, the skyline of New Alexandria was ablaze. Columns of black smoke clawed at the heavens, mingling with the neon glow of a city unraveling. Sirens wailed from every direction. Federation patrol ships screamed overhead, trading plasma fire with smaller, faster craft, resistance fighters who had seized the moment. Corin pulled Riven close as they emerged, shielding her weakened body with his own. A group of civilians sprinted past them, terror etched into their faces. Some were human, others alien. Here, in the lower districts, the lines between species blurred in desperation. "This way!" Corin shouted over the din, guiding Riven toward a side street partially shielded by the crumbling remains of a transport hub. Riven stumbled, the pain in her side worsening. Her vision swam, but she ground her teeth and forced herself onward. She would not fall now. Not after coming so far. They ducked into a half-collapsed transit station, the twisted remains of magrail cars providing some cover. Corin knelt beside her, his face tight with concern. "You need a medkit," he said, scanning their surroundings. "Later," Riven panted. "We have to reach your contact." Corin hesitated, torn between duty and instinct. Then he nodded grimly, helping her to her feet again. "The meeting point's 3 blocks north," he said. "Elias should be waiting with extraction." They moved through the ruins of the city, weaving between burning vehicles and shattered storefronts. Federation forces were everywhere, confused, scrambling, but still dangerous. At one intersection, a squad of loyalist soldiers blocked their path. Corin cursed under his breath. "Too many to fight." Riven peered past him, her sharp feline eyes catching the outline of a maintenance duct that led under the street. "There!" she rasped. Corin followed her gaze. Without hesitation, he hoisted her into the duct first, then scrambled after her. Inside, it was cramped and foul, but it sheltered them from the eyes of Federation patrols. As they crawled forward, Riven's arm brushed against Corin's. Even through the layers of armor and grime, the contact sparked something electric between them. Neither spoke. There was no need. When they finally emerged onto the next street, the noise was deafening. A Federation assault walker lumbered nearby, its cannons firing indiscriminately into a group of retreating civilians. Riven's claws flexed, rage burning through her exhaustion. "We can't stop them all," Corin said quietly, seeing the fury in her eyes. "We save what we can." She nodded stiffly, swallowing the helpless anger. They pressed on. A low rumble overhead signaled another incoming patrol. "Cover!" Corin hissed, pulling her into a wrecked shopfront just as a skimmer passed overhead. For a few tense moments, they huddled together, pressed against the cool remains of a collapsed wall. Riven sagged against him, her energy flagging. Corin tightened his grip around her shoulders, shielding her with his body. "You should have left me," she said weakly, her voice muffled against his chest. "Not a chance," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "You're not a soldier I dragged along, Riven. You're my partner in this. My equal." She tilted her head up, meeting his gaze. Something shifted between them, a fragile, raw thing finally breaking through all the scars and mistrust. "You mean that?" she whispered. "I do," Corin said. "Solari. Human. None of that matters. Not anymore." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two souls battered by war, finding something pure in the wreckage. Then a voice crackled over Corin's earpiece. "Elias here. We see you. Northeast corner, abandoned freight lot. Move fast, Federation lockdown in 10 minutes. Corin tapped the receiver. "Copy. Moving now." He helped Riven to her feet again. She swayed but stayed upright, fierce determination blazing in her golden eyes. They ran, or stumbled in Riven's case, through the war-torn streets, smoke and ash swirling around them like a storm. Ahead, beyond the freight lot's broken fence, a battered hover transport waited, its engines whining in protest. Elias stood at the ramp, waving them forward. Behind them, a fresh wave of Federation troops poured into the district, plasma fire lighting the ruins with deadly blue light. "Go!" Elias shouted. Corin half-carried Riven the last few steps. Blaster fire seared past their heads as they dove into the transport. Elias slammed the hatch shut and the vehicle lurched into the air, engines straining. Through the viewports, Riven saw New Alexandria falling to pieces behind them. A city built on lies. Now burning under the weight of its own sins. Corin sat beside her, breathing hard, one arm still wrapped protectively around her. "You did it," he said softly. "No," Riven whispered, her head resting against his shoulder as the adrenaline finally bled away. "We did it." Outside, the night sky blazed. And somewhere far beyond the smoke and fire, hope flickered to life once again. The battered transport weaved through the smoky upper atmosphere, heading toward the outer resistance sectors where the Federation's grip had been weakest. Inside the hold, Riven sat slumped against Corin, the last of her strength bleeding away now that the immediate danger had passed. Elias piloted from the front, barking occasional orders into the comms, coordinating with other resistance cells. His face was grim but determined. The city was burning, but that fire had sparked something bigger than either Corin or Riven had dared hope. Medic will be waiting at the landing zone, Elias called back over the roar of the engines. Corin nodded without moving. His arm remained firmly around Riven's shoulders, anchoring her as much as she anchored him. She tilted her head slightly, pressing her forehead lightly against the curve of his neck. "You're losing a lot of blood," Corin said, his voice low and rough. "You should see the other side," Riven rasped, her lips curling in a faint, teasing smile. He huffed a soft laugh, the sound tight with emotion. "You did good, Green Fire," he murmured against her ear, using the nickname she hadn't even realized he'd crafted for her until now. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring the rare, gentle warmth in his voice. When they touched down at the hidden resistance base nestled in the ravaged outskirts, a team of Solari and human medics rushed to meet them. Corin tried to lift Riven, but she shook her head stubbornly. "I can walk," she growled. He didn't argue. He simply stayed by her side, matching his pace to her faltering steps as they crossed the landing pad together, side by side, under the battered flags of a nascent alliance. Inside the infirmary, Riven endured the field dressings with quiet stoicism, only hissing when antiseptic burned across her deeper wounds. Corin sat beside her the entire time, his hand gripping hers tightly. Elias entered after a while, a stack of datapads clutched in one hand. "You two are officially legends," he said dryly. "The footage of the Aegis collapse is already spreading across half the major colonies. Federation loyalists are scrambling to deny it, but they can't stop the signal." "And Vale?" Corin asked. "Captured. Publicly. She's trying to spin it as a rogue operation, but it won't stick. Too many witnesses. Too much evidence." "What about the Solari colonies?" Riven asked, her voice soft but steady. Elias's face softened. "Relief fleets are already en route. Food, medicine, rebuilding teams. Negotiations for formal peace talks start tomorrow." Corin exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging with a weight lifted at last. Riven watched him, her heart twisting with something she wasn't sure she could name yet, but she knew it was powerful, and it was real. "You did this," she said quietly. "No," Corin replied, his dark eyes meeting hers. "We did." There was a beat of silence, thick and full. Elias cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'll give you two some space." He slipped out, leaving them alone in the sterile light of the infirmary. For a long moment either spoke. Then Riven pushed herself upright, wincing but determined. Her green fur was matted and stained, her armor battered, but she was still Riven, fierce and beautiful and alive. Corin rose too, stepping closer. "You don't have to keep fighting alone anymore," he said softly. "You never did. I forgot what it meant to trust," Riven admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Until you." Corin reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers intertwined, warm and certain. "I don't care what species you are," he said. "I don't care about the past. I care about you." Riven blinked rapidly, something burning behind her golden eyes. "I spent my whole life thinking humans were only capable of cruelty," she said. "You proved me wrong." She leaned into him then, resting her forehead against his chest, his arms coming up to hold her carefully, protectively. In that embrace, amidst the ruins of everything they had once known, something new began. Something strong enough to rebuild a broken galaxy. The next few days blurred together into a haze of recovery and rebuilding. Riven spent most of her time confined to the infirmary, the deep wound along her ribs mending slowly under the careful hands of Solari and human healers alike. She hated the weakness, hated the way her body betrayed her with exhaustion after only a few steps, but every time she started to rise too soon, Corin was there, steady, stubborn, pressing her gently but firmly back into bed. "You saved the world," he would say. "You've earned a few days of rest." At first, she scowled and argued. But eventually she surrendered, if only because having him nearby, his hand brushing against hers, his voice murmuring steady reassurances, made the walls of the infirmary feel less like a prison and more like a haven. Outside those walls, the galaxy stirred. The footage of Project Aegis, the footage of Admiral Vale's madness, spread faster than any official censor could stop. Protests erupted on human worlds. Allies rose from unexpected places. Refugee ships bearing the green flags of Solari colonies were escorted through formerly hostile sectors by human resistance fleets. The tide was turning. And Riven had lived to see it. One morning, a soft knock on the door pulled her from a restless sleep. She opened her eyes to find Corin leaning against the frame, a small smile playing across his lips. "You're cleared for light activity," he said, holding up a data pad. "Doctor's orders." Riven pushed herself upright, her golden eyes brightening with fierce satisfaction. "Finally!" Corin offered his hand. She took it without hesitation, allowing him to help her to her feet. Outside, the sun was rising, soft green and gold spilling across the shattered landscape, painting the broken ruins with color and life. Birds, real birds, not mechanical drones, circled overhead. Hope. Real hope. Corin led her slowly through the encampment. Soldiers and civilians alike paused to nod respectfully at her, some offering shy smiles, others giving the traditional Solari salute, a hand over the heart, palm open to the sky. "You're a symbol now," Corin said, watching her out of the corner of his eye. "I didn't ask to be," Riven muttered. "Neither did I," he said quietly. "But here we are." They made their way to a makeshift stage at the center of the camp where Elias and several resistance leaders, human and Solari, gathered before a sea of battered but determined faces. Today would mark the first formal announcement, an end to hostilities. A commitment to rebuild. Together. As they approached, Elias spotted them and waved. "You ready to address the galaxy heroes?" he called with a grin. Corin grimaced. "I'd rather take another blackguard patrol." Riven snorted softly. "Coward!" Corin smirked, but there was a tenderness in his gaze when he looked at her. He reached out, brushing his knuckles lightly against her cheek. "Whatever happens next," he said, voice low so only she could hear, "we face it together." Riven leaned into the touch, her tail curling unconsciously around his leg in a Solari gesture of deep affection and trust. It made him freeze for a second, surprised, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he shifted closer. "Together," she echoed. The first notes of a Solari anthem, a song of mourning, but also of rebirth, rose from the speakers. It wasn't perfect. The humans tried to follow along awkwardly, out of sync and out of tune. But it didn't matter. For the first time in generations, two people stood side by side not as conquerors and conquered, but as survivors. As allies. As friends. Corin offered his arm. Riven took it, stepping up onto the stage beside him, her green furred tail flicking once in quiet pride. The crowd roared their approval, the sound rolling across the battered plains like a tide. And for the first time since she was a child, Riven allowed herself to believe. The future could be different. The future could be theirs. The speech was mercifully short. Neither Riven nor Corin were born for grand words and politics, and the people gathered didn't need more promises. They needed to see them, human and Solari, side by side, alive, fighting not against each other anymore, but for a shared future. As soon as it ended, the leaders swept into meetings and negotiations, and the crowds slowly dispersed, their faces brighter than they had been in months. Riven slipped away from the gathering, her body still stiff with half-healed wounds but her spirit lighter than she could remember. Corin followed without a word, his steps falling naturally in line beside hers. They walked beyond the outer edge of the camp, to a hill overlooking the ruined skyline of New Alexandria in the distance. The city still smoldered, but already signs of rebuilding had begun, smaller vessels ferrying supplies, teams of both species working side by side. The wind tugged gently at Riven's hair, lifting strands of pale green across her face. She closed her eyes, breathing deep the clean, sharp scent of morning dew and new beginnings. For a long while either spoke. Then Corin said quietly, "I've been thinking." Riven cracked one golden eye open at him. "Dangerous." He huffed a soft laugh. "Probably. But, he hesitated, looking out over the broken landscape. This place. This moment. It's not the end, is it? No, Riven said. It's the start of something bigger. He turned to face her fully, and she could see the uncertainty flickering behind his dark eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed. I don't know where I fit into this new world, he admitted. I was made for war. For orders. For lines drawn in blood. But peace. He shook his head. I don't know how to live in it. You learn, Riven said simply. And you? He asked. Where will you go? She smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. My people will need me. There's so much to rebuild. So much to heal. Corin's throat bobbed once as he swallowed. Then maybe we rebuild together. Riven blinked at him, startled. I know it won't be easy, Corin continued, rushing on before fear could stop him. You'll have your duties, I'll have mine. People will look at us and see enemies where there aren't any. But I don't care. He stepped closer, lowering his forehead to touch hers gently in the Solari gesture of deep trust. I want to be wherever you are, Riven. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. This human. This stubborn, scarred, loyal human who had crossed every line of hatred and fear to stand with her. Slowly, Riven lifted her hand to cradle the back of his head, claws sheathed, her touch unbearably gentle. And I want you with me, she whispered. If you can endure living among green-furred beasts. He smiled, a real, warm, unguarded smile. If you're the beast, he murmured, I'll take my chances. She laughed, the sound surprising herself, light and soft and full of life. And when Corin kissed her, it wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of battlefield survivors, but something steadier, richer, a promise. The sun rose higher over the hills, gilding the broken world in gold. In the distance, a battered Federation flag was lowered, replaced with a new one, white and green, human and Solari symbols entwined. A future written not in conquest, but in unity. In hope. In love. Side by side, Riven and Corin stood atop the hill, looking out over the wounded world they had saved. Not as enemies. Not even just as allies. But as something far rarer, far stronger. As partners. As the first light of true peace. Together. Forever.